The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
When the days drew near for Jesus to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him. On their way, they entered the village of the Samaritans to make ready for him, but they did not receive him, because his face was set toward Jerusalem. When his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But he turned and rebuked them. Then they went on to another village. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." To another he said, "Follow me." But he said, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but first let me say farewell to those at my home." Jesus said to him, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ. Elisha was ready when Elijah passed by. Yes, he was busy plowing the field when Elijah delivered God's call. Still, he knew the significance of Elijah's mantle, or his outside cloak, being thrown over Elisha's shoulder. When Elijah kept on walking, Elisha ran after him. He was ready. We'll remember from last week that Elijah had emerged from his cave, where he was cowering in fear and self-loathing, that he finally heard God speak to him, not in the wind or the fire or the earthquake, but in the silence. And that still small voice told him to go forth to anoint 2 kings and his own eventual replacement as prophet, Elisha. This story is the origin of the saying, passing of the mantle, transferring leadership from one to another or from a mentor to the chosen successor. And in this case, chosen by God, just as Elijah was earlier. Elisha asks only to say goodbye to his family and to prepare a celebration for his people, which he does by turning his livelihood into a feast, building a fire with the wooden yoke, and simmering a big pot of oxtail stew from his beasts of burden. This is a clear-cut ending to life as he had known it, and a new life beginning. Elisha clearly knows his role. He knows the significance of that mantle that was thrown so casually over his shoulders. He was ready. Jesus was not quite so patient. The 3 people he spoke to on his way from Samaria were not so ready. They wanted to go back home first, to bury a father, to say goodbye. But there's an urgency here and a razor-sharp focus. Jesus has reached the turning point of his ministry. He has turned his face to Jerusalem, and from here on, he's moving with intention and commitment toward the finish line. Oh, there's still a lot of ministry to come, a lot of teaching and healing, a lot of resistance and hostility. But he must press forward, and he has to make sure those who come along understand what they are in for. So he says to those who think they want to follow him, if you're going to follow me, if you're going to come along, there is a cost. This is not a gravy train. You're going to have to leave everything you've ever loved behind. There will be no cushy bed at the end of the road. We depend entirely on the hospitality of those we meet. And if they don't receive us, we move on. And no, you cannot put off following me until later, until your parents die and you bury them. It's now or never. You have to plow forward and deep. If you look back, the rows will be crooked and shallow, and the crops will suffer. Other than the 12 that he has called as disciples, it doesn't seem like anyone in this story takes Jesus' invitation up. We don't know, but it seems like they turn back to burying their dead, putting their lives in order, their foxholes and their comfortable dens. It feels harsh, doesn't it? Jesus has gone right down to the nitty-gritty of what it means to be a disciple, what it means to choose life. He has been clear about the requirements, the expectations of being a disciple, and the cost is not trivial. A cost that might go way beyond the comfort zone and may demand one's whole life. I expect that this would separate the admirers from the followers. The size of the crowd would dwindle. And I wrestle with what that would mean for me, what it means and signifies for the church. Jesus knew that his time was limited. He had to pack in so much in those few years and make sure he had the right people in place to receive his mantle. His 12 apostles, other disciples who could carry on his ministry and his message. Eventually, his church, the body of Christ. Yes, these centuries, millennia later, we wear the mantle. Are we up to it? I know that when I first identified the tug that I was feeling as a call to ordained ministry, I did not go running to the nearest seminary or denominational office saying, "Send me, send me." No, I carefully put one toe in the water, not convinced that this was real. I don't think I questioned God. It was my own ability to discern the call that I questioned. Surely I must be wrong. God would not be calling me. Me, who had only recently returned to church. Me, a single mom with 2 sons to put through college. Surely not. But the toe in the water extended to a foot, then up to the waist. Several steps more, and I was all in. And I didn't drown. Even now, though, there are so many nudges that I ignore or put off. After I finish this project, I just have to do this one little thing first. Oh, maybe when I retire. What would a response like Elisha's, like Jesus' disciples, look like in the world in which we live? What would it look like for the church? This is what keeps me awake at night. There are some who say that the reason evangelical churches have grown so much is that they have more stringent expectations of their members, whereas the mainline churches have been co-opted by the culture, its individualism, its consumer mentality. I'm not convinced, but it is true that churches have lost much of their place in society, and that is so for evangelicals as well as for the mainline. We do not live in a first century world, obviously. We have surely lost the urgency that Jesus brought to that world, which is a shame when we look around us at the tenuous situations in which we do live: climate change, gun violence, hunger, poverty, racism, so many challenges and so many obstacles. This is what our presiding bishop, Bishop Curry, is urging us to address. The Jesus movement, remember? He says, In the first century, Jesus of Nazareth inspired a movement, a community of people whose lives were centered in Jesus Christ and committed to living the way of God's unconditional, unselfish, sacrificial, and redemptive love. Before they were called church, or even before they were called Christian, this Jesus movement was simply called the Way. He goes on to say, today I believe our vocation is to live as the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. But how can we together grow more deeply with Jesus Christ at the center of our lives so we can bear witness to his way of love in and for the world? Well, one way, which many of you know, is through the way of love. Not simply a program to take for a few weeks and then put aside, but a way of living. It's not meant to stay in your favorite prayer place or within the walls of the church. It's meant to deepen our faith and our commitment to change what we can in today's world. Some progress has been made in treating all people equally, or as our baptismal covenant says, respecting the dignity of all people. Some change has happened slowly. This month, for example, was the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. Today, our diocese will be represented in the Chicago Pride Parade to show its support of our LGBTQ friends and members. This year is also the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots and happens to be the 50th Chicago Pride Parade. Bishop Curry released this statement on pride. During June, he said, Americans and people around the world observe Pride. I am mindful that Pride is both a celebration and a testament to sorrow and struggle that has not yet ended. Especially this month, I offer special thanks to God for the strength of the LGBTQ community and for all that you share with your spouses, partners, and children, with your faith communities, and indeed, with our entire nation. There is still a long way to go. As part of the Jesus movement, we must assure that the advances we have made are not eroded, and that the other challenges we face continue to be addressed boldly. This is the church's vocation, the mantle that has been passed to us. It is not an easy way, and yet I believe it would be a life of blessings, not free of difficulty, of course, but abundant, God's gifts. The trouble is, we have to be free in order to receive the gift. We cannot be booked solid with other priorities, engagements, filled up so full that there is no room for the gift. Are we ready? Amen.